Have you ever found yourself endlessly chasing something? Success, happiness, love, only to feel it slipping further away the harder you try to reach it? There's a certain kind of torment in the pursuit, like running toward the horizon. It looks near, but the closer you get, the more it recedes. And in that constant pursuit, you start losing parts of yourself. You grow tired. You question everything. You wonder if maybe it's you. Maybe you're not trying hard enough, not focused enough, not worthy enough. But what if the problem isn't that you care too little, but that you care too much? There's a Zen truth whispered softly through time that says when you stop caring, results come. At first glance, it seems absurd. We've been raised in a world that glorifies ambition, hustle, and relentless striving. We are told to never stop chasing our dreams. But what if that very chase is the reason we can't catch them? What if the very act of clinging is the barrier? Imagine holding water in your hand. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. That's how desire works. That's how control works. And somewhere deep down, you felt that truth. You've seen it in the way relationships crumbled when you tried too hard to shape them. You've seen it in the way opportunities seemed to vanish when you obsessed over every step. And the more control you tried to assert, the more life seemed to slip out of reach. There was once a monk who lived beside a quiet river. He spent his days in meditation, watching the current, learning from its movement. One day, a traveler approached him, worn and weary from trying to fix every corner of his life. His job, his marriage, his identity. The monk looked at him, pointed at the flowing water and said gently, "Notice how it doesn't resist the rocks. It finds a way around them." In that single moment, something shifted for the traveler. He had spent his life trying to remove the obstacles, to smooth the path, to control the terrain. But the river didn't need to control. It simply adapted. It focused on movement, not resistance. The lesson is clear. Peace comes not from control, but from surrender. Not from detaching with indifference, but from embracing what is with open hands. So ask yourself, how much of your stress, your anxiety, your emotional exhaustion is coming from trying to manage things that were never yours to control? How many times have you played scenarios in your mind, rehearsing conversations, replaying past events, worrying about future ones? And what did that really bring you, except fatigue and a racing mind? When we begin to let go of what doesn't belong to us, other people's opinions, the outcomes we can't control, the need for things to unfold in a specific way, we make space for clarity. We make space for peace. And this doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring wisely. You start investing your energy in the places where it actually creates movement, in your thoughts, your reactions, your inner state. Letting go is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the decision to stop pouring yourself into the illusion of control, to stop trying to bend life to your will, and instead walk alongside it, responding to its rhythms with grace. Because life will never be fully predictable. People will surprise you. Outcomes will vary. Plans will break. But none of these have the power to disturb your peace unless you hand them the keys. Letting go feels like relief. It feels like a deep breath after years of holding it in. And it begins in small ways. In choosing not to respond to that one provocation. In deciding not to chase a validation that keeps eluding you. In pausing before reacting to an outcome you didn't expect and asking instead, what now? Not why me? We often confuse letting go with apathy, as though it means we don't care anymore. But letting go is the ultimate form of care because it says, I care too much about my inner peace to keep battling what is out of my hands. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means shifting your energy toward what actually brings you growth. It means focusing not on controlling the storm, but learning to be still within it. You start by asking, what is truly mine to carry? And with that question, you begin to put down what never belonged to you in the first place. You lay down the need to please everyone. You lay down the obsession with being understood. You lay down the expectation that life will always be fair. And in that laying down, you stand taller, freer, more aligned. Because you're no longer entangled in every outcome. You're no longer weighed down by every shift in the wind. You're no longer chasing what was never yours to hold. And in that stillness, something magical begins to unfold. The very things you were chasing begin to approach you. Peace, joy, purpose, love. Not because you forced them into your life, but because you made room for them by releasing the grip. There's a path that leads away from exhaustion, and it winds not through more effort, but through surrender. Not through pushing harder, but through flowing more freely. And if you listen closely, you'll hear it calling. There's a certain kind of silence that speaks louder than any noise. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of alignment. The stillness that settles in your chest when you finally stop grasping. It's that moment when you realize you no longer have to beg life for answers. You no longer need to demand a timeline. You just breathe. And in that breath, you begin to trust something you once feared. Uncertainty. For most of us, uncertainty feels like the enemy. It's uncomfortable. It leaves room for doubt, for fear, for what-ifs. And so we try to plan everything, control every detail, predict every possible outcome. We check every box. We cling to structure like it's a life raft in a storm. But life by its nature resists that kind of control. The tighter you hold it, the more it wriggles free. Letting go is not about giving into chaos. It's about embracing flow. And flow is what happens when you meet the present moment without resistance. When you stop asking the moment to be something else. When you stop waiting for the perfect alignment of stars before you allow yourself to feel peace. Imagine waking up and not reaching for your phone to scan for emergencies. Imagine beginning your day not with dread or urgency, but with awareness, with presence, with an understanding that nothing you force into happening will feel as good as something that arrives in its own time. We're taught that effort equals reward, that if you just push hard enough, hustle fast enough, grind without pause, then the universe will reward your striving. But the deeper wisdom whispers otherwise. It says there is a season for action and a season for surrender, a time to speak and a time to be still, a time to pursue and a time to receive. We've forgotten how to receive. We become so conditioned to chase that rest feels like laziness, that ease feels suspicious, that stillness must be a trap, but rest is not giving up. Ease is not weakness. Stillness is not failure. These are the places where clarity grows, where insight forms, where transformation begins. You begin to notice that the things meant for you don't require you to break yourself to earn them. They come when you are aligned, not when you are exhausted. They arrive not with chaos, but with quiet certainty. They don't crash into your life. They land softly, gently, like something that was always on its way. When you let go of the outcome, you return to intention. You begin to ask, well, what is this really about? Not how can I get what I want? You shift from manipulating life into delivering your desires, into participating in life with humility. You show up, you do the work, and then you release the grip. You trust. And trust at its core is not blind. It is grounded in knowing that you are not abandoned, that life is not working against you, even when it feels like it is. Letting go doesn't mean you no longer care about what happens. It means you no longer let what happens dictate who you are. You remain steady even when the path shifts beneath your feet. You remain whole even when the world asks you to fracture. You remain centered not because life is easy, but because you've anchored yourself in something deeper than circumstance. There is power in understanding that you are not your achievements. You are not your failures. You are not the outcome of one moment or the result of someone else's decision. You are something much quieter, much steadier, much more resilient than any label can capture. And when you return to that truth, you stop chasing meaning in all the wrong places. You stop grasping at relationships that don't hold space for your becoming. You stop attaching your value to how well things are going. You stop asking life to perform for you, and instead you begin to meet it as a companion. You walk alongside it. You feel its rhythm. You trust its pace. There's a story that circles around Zen teachings of a man trying to cross a wide river. He builds a raft with great effort and paddles across. But when he reaches the shore, he begins carrying the raft on his back. When someone asks why, he says, "This raft helped me. What if I need it again?" And so he continues, burdened by something that once served him. Letting go is also about this, knowing when to thank the raft and put it down, knowing when to release the tools, the strategies, the identities that once kept you afloat but now weigh you down. You don't dishonor the past by moving on. You honor it by not letting it define your future. You can let go of the narrative that says you have to fight for love to keep it. You can let go of the idea that success must come through suffering. You can let go of the belief that peace is something you find only once everything is in place. Peace is here, in the letting go, in the breath you take when you stop needing the answer, in the stillness that follows the surrender. You begin to trust that even when you don't know what's next, you'll know what to do when it arrives. You begin to believe that what is yours cannot be kept from you, not by time, not by circumstance, not even by your own missteps. And with that belief, your grip loosens, your heart softens, your shoulders drop. This is not the end of striving. It's the beginning of something more beautiful, living. Living not from fear, but from faith. Not from control, but from clarity. Not from pressure, but from peace. And from that space, everything shifts. Not because the world changed, but because you did. There is a softness that emerges when you finally stop forcing everything. A gentleness that begins to take shape in your soul, not because life suddenly became easier, but because you're no longer approaching it with clenched fists. You begin to move differently, not with urgency, but with reverence. Not chasing, not resisting, just meeting each moment as it comes. And this shift, though subtle, changes everything. You find yourself standing in situations that used to trigger you, and instead of reacting, you pause, not to calculate a better response, but to breathe, to acknowledge that you are no longer that version of yourself who had to fight for every scrap of understanding. You've grown now. You've softened, not because you've given up, but because you've finally realized that peace is louder than anger and more enduring than control. There's a sacredness to that pause. It's not empty. It's full of presence, full of a wisdom that says, I don't need to fix this right now. I don't need to be right in this moment. I only need to stay connected to myself. Because when you're connected to yourself, you stop chasing connection from those who never truly saw you. You stop needing to prove your worth to people who were never ready to hold it. You stop demanding closure from those who closed the door long ago. And in that stillness, something deeper emerges, a sense of trust, not in the outcome, but in your ability to face it. You trust that no matter what comes, you will meet it with grace. You trust that no matter who leaves, you will remain whole. You trust that even if nothing goes as planned, you will still find meaning, still find breath, still find beauty. This kind of trust doesn't arrive overnight. It's born in the moments you've had to stand alone, in the nights you held your own heart together, in the mornings you rose without a clear direction, but chose to rise anyway. It's carved through loss, refined through solitude, made stronger by silence. And when it arrives, it doesn't need to shout. It simply exists, steady and sure, like a mountain that has weathered every season. Letting go is not about walking away from life. It's about finally walking into it, fully present, no longer dragging the weight of every expectation, every disappointment, every what if. You realize that life is not meant to be held like a plan. It's meant to be lived like a poem, unfolding, surprising, full of both rhythm and mystery. You start to make decisions from a place of alignment, not fear. You don't say yes to everything just to feel safe. You don't say no to things that scare you just to protect your comfort. You listen deeper, you feel more. You ask yourself not, what should I do, but what feels true? And that shift from should to truth is what brings you home. Home is not a place, it's not a person, it's not a feeling that arrives when everything is perfect. Home is you. It's the way you carry yourself when the world turns uncertain. It's the way you soothe your own heart when it breaks. It's the way you return again and again to the breath, to the body, to the present moment, because that is where life is happening. And the more you return to yourself, the less you need from the world around you. Not because you become closed off, but because you've become full. Not because you've given up, but because you've grown roots. You can still love, still connect, still show up fully for others, but not at the cost of abandoning yourself. You don't pour from an empty cup anymore. You don't bleed just to prove you can heal. You don't sacrifice your boundaries to keep peace, because you understand now that peace without authenticity isn't peace. It's performance, and you're done performing. You're not here to be liked by everyone. You're here to be whole. You're not here to avoid conflict at all costs. You're here to speak truth with compassion and conviction. You're not here to fit into molds that shrink your spirit. You're here to expand, to unfold, to live in your fullness. And that fullness, it's not always loud. It's not always grand. Sometimes it's found in the way you say no without guilt, in the way you rest without apology, in the way you love without attachment, in the way you forgive. Not to forget, but to free yourself. Letting go, in its purest form, is about choosing freedom. Freedom from old stories. Freedom from roles you never asked to play. Freedom from the belief that your worth is tied to how much you achieve or how little you feel. Freedom from the constant chase. You begin to see that what is meant for you won't require you to lose yourself. It won't demand your anxiety. It won't ask you to shrink. It will meet you in your wholeness, not your desperation. And when it arrives, it won't feel like chaos. It will feel like peace. Until then, you stop waiting for life to deliver happiness. You start creating it in the small moments, in the way the light hits your face in the morning, in the quiet cup of tea you drink with both hands, in the walk you take without your phone, in the kindness you offer without expecting anything in return. This is how you live now, fully, freely, gently, not clinging, not striving, just being. Because in the end, it's not about having everything figured out. It's about being present with what is, trusting what will be, and letting go of everything that tells you you're not already enough. There's a quiet revolution that happens inside you when you realize you no longer need to be in control of everything to feel safe. At first, it feels foreign, even frightening, because control was the illusion that kept you afloat for so long. It gave you structure, a sense of order, the comfort of predictability. But beneath all that, it also carried fear. Fear that if you let go, everything would fall apart. Fear that surrender was the same as failure. But what you learn slowly and gently is that letting go doesn't mean the world falls apart. It means you finally stop holding it up by yourself. You stop carrying what isn't yours to carry. You stop inserting yourself into outcomes you can't shape. You stop bending your spirit to fit into what you thought was required. You begin to understand that freedom is not found in control. It's found in presence, in being fully here without needing to manipulate what comes next, in meeting life where it is, not where you think it should be, in trusting that what you need will find you and what leaves was never truly yours. This trust doesn't make you passive. It makes you peaceful. You still take action. You still care. But you do it from a place of inner steadiness, not outer desperation. You are no longer rushing to fix every detail. You are no longer panicking when plans shift. You move with life now, not against it. In that movement, fluid and grounded, becomes your new way of being. The people around you begin to notice, not because you're louder or more visible, but because you're different, calmer, more present. You no longer fill every silence with explanation. You no longer overextend yourself to meet expectations that weren't yours to begin with. You no longer wear your stress like a badge of honor. Instead, you begin to wear peace, not as a performance, but as your true skin. It softens your face, it slows your breath, it changes the tone of your voice. It makes you magnetic, not because you're trying to attract, but because your stillness is rare in a world addicted to noise. This peace doesn't mean your life is perfect. It means you've stopped needing it to be. You stop waiting for the next achievement to feel worthy. You stop waiting for someone else to love you the way you were always meant to love yourself. You stop waiting for circumstances to align before you allow yourself to feel content. You begin to meet yourself where you are, in the in-between, in the unknown, in the ordinary. And you start to see that this too is sacred. That peace isn't something you arrive at once everything is figured out. Peace is what greets you when you stop demanding that life look a certain way. You start choosing peace in the small moments. When your plans fall through and you decide not to spiral. When someone misunderstands you and you resist the urge to explain. When fear rises and instead of pushing it away, you sit with it, breathe through it, and let it pass. These moments add up. They become the bricks that build your inner sanctuary, a place you can return to again and again, no matter what's happening outside. And from that sanctuary, you begin to move differently. You become more discerning. Not everyone gets access to your energy now. Not every invitation is accepted. Not every opinion is entertained. You listen, but you don't absorb. You witness, but you don't react. You've learned that peace doesn't require participation in every conversation. It doesn't require proving yourself over and over. It doesn't demand that you engage with what doesn't nourish you. You learn the art of pausing, not as hesitation, but as wisdom. Before you speak, before you decide, before you respond. You pause, you feel, you listen, not to the chaos of the world, but to the quiet of your own soul. And in that quiet, you hear something you couldn't before, your own truth. Not the version shaped by others' expectations, not the voice molded by past pain, but the voice that has always been there, waiting for you to stop running long enough to hear it. That voice tells you that you are already whole, already enough, that you don't need to chase anything to be worthy, that you don't need to fix everything to feel peace, that you don't need to know the outcome to trust the path. You begin to live with more intention, more compassion, more grace for yourself and for others. You stop judging your healing. You stop rushing your growth. You stop criticizing the parts of you that are still learning. You hold space for them instead. You offer them kindness. You become your own safe place. And as you do, something shifts in your relationships. You stop seeking intensity and start craving authenticity. You stop needing constant validation and start valuing mutual respect. You stop settling for surface-level connections and start embracing those who meet you in your depth. You learn to say no, not as rejection, but as self-respect. You learn to walk away, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You learn to choose yourself, not because others failed you, but because you finally realize that your peace is not up for negotiation. Letting go becomes less about loss and more about space. Space to breathe, space to rest, space to grow. And in that space, you bloom, not because someone gave you permission, but because you stopped asking for it. There's a quiet kind of revolution that takes place inside when you finally decide you are done living at the mercy of outcomes. When you stop measuring your worth by how well things go or how perfectly they match your plans. When you stop holding your breath, waiting for something to validate your journey. In that moment, everything softens, not because the world becomes easier, but because your grip loosens. You realize you've been holding too tightly for too long, and now you let go, not of effort, not of care, but of attachment to how things must turn out. You show up, you give your all, and then you release. You surrender not because you're powerless, but because you're wise enough to know where your power ends. And your power never lived in the outcome. It lives in the moment, in the breath, in the courage to keep showing up with an open heart, even when nothing is guaranteed. This shift is subtle. It won't always look like progress from the outside. It won't come with loud announcements or visible milestones. It shows up in the way you respond to disappointment, in the way you don't spiral when plans change, in the way you hold space for both hope and reality without letting either one dominate your peace. You begin to understand that peace isn't found in what happens. It's found in how you relate to what happens. That two people can experience the same event and carry it completely differently, not because of the event, but because of the story they tell themselves about it. And you begin to rewrite your story, gently, honestly, with compassion. You no longer tell yourself you failed just because something ended. You no longer assume you're unworthy just because someone didn't stay. You no longer label your efforts a waste just because the reward didn't come in the way you expected. You see more clearly now. You see that every experience, every rise, every fall, was a thread in the tapestry of your becoming, and what a becoming it is, not towards perfection, but towards presence, not towards control, but towards connection, not towards certainty, but towards surrender. You begin to find joy in the simplest things again, in the way sunlight spills across the floor, in the sound of your own footsteps on a quiet morning, in the taste of your coffee when you drink it slowly, without distraction. In these moments, you feel something rise in your chest, not excitement, not intensity, but peace, that deep, unwavering peace that comes when you stop resisting life. You begin to trust that you don't need to chase every opportunity to be successful, that you don't need to hold on tightly to every relationship to be loved, that you don't need to know exactly where you're going to move forward. You only need to keep walking, one intentional step at a time, grounded in presence. This doesn't mean you never plan. It means you stop letting the plan become a prison. You hold your intentions lightly. You make room for miracles. You let life surprise you. And in doing so, you create space for things to unfold more beautifully than you could have ever orchestrated. There's a freedom that blooms in this space, the kind of freedom that can't be bought or achieved, only lived. It's the freedom to rest without guilt, to breathe without rushing, to sit in the unknown without needing to fill it with noise. It's the kind of freedom that comes when you stop trying to make things happen and begin trusting that the right things will find you when you are truly ready. And readiness doesn't always mean perfection. It means openness, willingness, presence. Readiness means your heart is available, not distracted by the need to prove something, not armored by fear, not distorted by urgency, just available, software, honest. you begin to understand that the most important work you'll ever do is not in changing the world around you, but in tending to the world within you. That when you align with peace, the outer world begins to mirror that alignment in mysterious ways. Not because it suddenly becomes perfect, but because you've changed the way you see it. You've changed the way you hold it. So you choose to hold it all a little more gently now. The plans, the people, the outcomes, the past. You hold them with love, not control. You hold them with presence, not possession. You hold them with gratitude even when they didn't turn out the way you hoped. Because now you know. Peace isn't about what happens. It's about how you meet what happens. With softness instead of tension, with trust instead of fear, with breath instead of resistance. This is the life you're building now. A life of conscious surrender. A life where you still care deeply, but you no longer let that care consume you. A life where you show up fully, but no longer shrink yourself for approval. A life where you walk with peace, not because everything is okay, but because you are. You are okay, even in the waiting, even in the becoming, even when the outcome is unclear, because you finally return to yourself. And that is where peace begins. When the dust finally begins to settle, when the noise dies down and the pressure fades, you start to notice something you'd long forgotten, the stillness within you. It was always there, but buried, covered up by the demands to be more, to do more, to become someone greater, someone acceptable, someone worthy in the eyes of a world that never pauses to look beyond the surface. And in that quiet, in that pause, you rediscover something sacred, your enoughness. Not the kind you earn through achievement, not the kind you win through praise or approval, but the kind that has always existed beneath every version of you that tried too hard, that reached too far, that ran too fast. It was always there whispering, "You are already whole." You begin to remember that the rush never gave you what you were really searching for, that the hustle only distracted you from the truth that you already had what mattered, that rest was not something to feel guilty about, it was something to honor. Something to protect, because in rest, you meet yourself again. And when you meet yourself again, you don't see someone who failed. You see someone who survived, someone who kept showing up, someone who held space for others even when they were breaking inside, someone who made room for healing without knowing what it would look like, someone who quietly carried their pain with grace until they found the courage to set it down. Letting go isn't about pretending it never mattered. It's about acknowledging that it mattered deeply and choosing to stop holding it now because it no longer serves your growth. You bow to the past, not in shame, but in respect. And then you walk forward, not with resentment, but with reverence for the lessons you've learned. You stop waiting for the apology that never came. You stop holding on to the dream that no longer fits. You stop chasing validation from those who can't offer it. Not because you're numb, but because you're awake now. Because you've tasted the kind of peace that doesn't rely on outside conditions. Because you've realized that clarity often comes not from adding more, but from subtracting what no longer belongs. There's a kind of wisdom that rises when you stop filling the silence, when you stop rushing to fix, when you simply allow the moment to be what it is. In that space, you discover your capacity, your softness, your inner strength that isn't flashy or loud, but steady and enduring. You learn that it's okay to not have all the answers, that not knowing is not the same as failing, that resting is not the same as giving up. And you begin to understand the quiet power of patience. You no longer measure progress by how fast you're moving, but by how deeply you're rooted. You stop comparing your journey to others. You stop racing time. You realize that nature never rushes, yet everything is accomplished. And just like the seed knows when to sprout, when to rise, when to bloom, You trust that your timing is unfolding in ways you don't need to fully understand. Trust becomes your new foundation, not blind trust, but trust built from experience. From all the times life held you when you thought you were falling. From the moments that made no sense at the time, but revealed their meaning when you look back. From the whispers of intuition you followed, even when no one else understood. You begin to realize that letting go isn't something you do once. It's a daily practice, a gentle, intentional choosing to release what you can't control, to stop rehearsing the worst-case scenario, to stop trying to rewrite the past. You wake up each morning and say, "Today I choose to hold myself gently, to trust the unfolding, to stay present even in uncertainty." And in that practice, life becomes softer, not because challenges disappear, but because you stop resisting what is. You begin to meet each moment with more openness, more curiosity, more grace. You stop needing things to go your way and start asking, "What is life showing me here?" And that simple question changes everything. You learn to welcome the mess without judgment, to sit with the discomfort without panicking, to see the lesson before rushing toward a solution. You stop trying to fix yourself and instead start listening to yourself. You stop seeing your emotions as problems to solve and start honoring them as signals to guide you. You begin to speak to yourself differently, more softly, more honestly. You no longer say, "What's wrong with me?" You ask, "What do I need?" You no longer push yourself harder. You sit with yourself longer. You no longer criticize the parts of you that feel broken. You cradle them. You ask them to tell you their story. And in that listening, you begin to heal. Because healing, too, is not something that arrives with fanfare. It sneaks in, quiet, humble, gentle. It lives in the choices you make when no one's watching. In the moments you choose rest instead of productivity, silence instead of noise, compassion instead of critique. It lives in the days you choose to show up for yourself, even when nothing feels certain. This is the essence of letting go. Not letting go of life, but letting go of the version of you who believed they had to do it all, carry it all, know it all. And embracing the version who trusts, who breathes, who softens, who receives. And that version of you, that version is not weak. That version is free. There comes a moment, often unexpected, when you look around and realize the world didn't fall apart when you stopped trying to control everything. That nothing shattered when you let things unfold without your constant interference. That life went on, not chaotically, but naturally. The sun still rose. The seasons still changed. People still came and went. And in that realization, something deep inside begins to relax. It's not that everything suddenly feels perfect. It's that you no longer need it to be. You've begun to make peace with the way things are. You've loosened your grip. You've stepped back from the exhausting habit of trying to manage everything and everyone. And in doing so, you've made space for breath, for clarity, for yourself. This is the part of your journey where you start to witness the beauty of non-resistance. When you stop forcing conversations that never go anywhere. When you stop over-explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. When you stop running toward things that never make you feel at home. You just stop. Not because you've given up, but because you've awakened. Because you've begun to ask yourself a new question. Not, what do I need to fix? But what can I simply let be? And the answers are quiet, but profound. You can let people be who they are, without constantly trying to change them. You can let the past stay in the past, without dragging it into every present moment. You can let your heart break, without needing to glue it back together right away. You can let the silence speak, without rushing to fill it. You can let things end, even if you don't yet know what will begin in their place. And perhaps most importantly, you can let yourself be enough, exactly as you are. unfinished, uncertain, healing, whole. You begin to realize that letting go isn't just about things. It's about identities. It's about releasing the version of you that clung to pain because it was familiar. The version of you that defined yourself by struggle. The version that believed love had to be earned, peace had to be deserved, rest had to be justified. That version was brave. That version got you here, but now you're ready to grow beyond it. Now you choose softness. You choose to walk slower, to listen deeper, to live more fully in the spaces between. You choose conversations that nourish, not deplete. You choose relationships where love doesn't come at the cost of your sanity. You choose environments that support your expansion, not demand your shrinking. You choose a life that honors your inner landscape, even if it doesn't look impressive from the outside. And that choosing, that quiet rebellion against all the conditioning that told you to keep chasing, becomes your liberation. You start celebrating yourself for things no one else sees, to see if they can still reach the old version of you that once met conflict with more conflict. But they won't find that version anymore. You've outgrown them, not with bitterness, but with grace, not with superiority, but with softness. You don't need to say it. You don't need to declare your growth. It's felt in the way you respond or don't, in the way you protect your peace, not with walls, but with discernment, in the way you still show up with love, but no longer with compromise that empties you. That is your quiet revolution. That is your inner freedom. That is the beginning of a life not defined by what you react to, but by what you choose to align with. There's a point you reach in your journey where you don't even feel the urge to argue anymore. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've started seeing through things so clearly. You recognize what's real and what's not. You notice when a conversation is rooted in truth and when it's just another performance, an attempt to bait you back into a version of yourself you've outgrown. And you smile not out of smugness, but out of peace, because you know exactly who you are, and that knowing is enough. You see, people who are committed to misunderstanding you will always find a way. Even your silence will be twisted. Even your calm will be labeled as arrogance. Even your boundary will be mistaken for betrayal. And so you stop trying to manage their perspective. You stop trying to edit yourself to be more digestible. You stop shrinking your truth just to avoid conflict. There's no peace in appeasement. There's no freedom in constantly molding yourself to fit into containers that were never built for your spirit. You've learned to stay rooted in your values, even when the world around you asks you to bend. You've learned to remain still, even when others try to pull you into storms. And that stillness, it's not indifference, it's clarity. It's knowing what's yours and what's not. You stop picking up what doesn't belong to you. Other people's projections, other people's triggers, other people's opinions about your path. You see it all clearly now. You recognize that when someone lashes out, it says more about their wounds than your worth. You stop internalizing their pain as your responsibility. You stop letting someone else's inability to see your heart become the reason you question it. And in that detachment, something beautiful starts to bloom. You begin to feel lighter, not because life is easier, but because you're carrying less of what was never yours. You begin to feel free, not because everything is perfect, but because your peace no longer depends on it. You begin to feel powerful, not in control of others, but in full ownership of yourself. You also start honoring the moments of discomfort without trying to immediately fix them. You sit with the tension instead of escaping it. You hold space for your emotions without drowning in them. You've learned that emotions are visitors, not dictators. They come, they speak, and they leave. And your job is not to suppress them or explode because of them, but simply to listen, to learn, and to let go. And when conflict arises, as it inevitably will, you approach it with presence instead of panic. You no longer react just to defend your pride. You respond only when it adds to the healing. And if it doesn't, you choose silence. Not as avoidance, but as wisdom. Because sometimes the most honest thing you can say is nothing at all. You stop seeking resolution from people who don't have the capacity to offer it. You stop expecting accountability from those who are still lost in denial. You accept that some apologies will never come, and some wounds will remain open without closure. And yet, even without the apology, you find peace. Even without the resolution, you move forward, because you've made peace your own responsibility. And that choice to be at peace regardless of what anyone else does, that is liberation. That is sovereignty. That is the moment you stop needing others to clean up what they broke. Not because they shouldn't, but because you won't spend your life waiting for someone else to choose healing before you do. You realize that some people love chaos because it's familiar. They poke, they prod, they stir drama, not because they want connection, but because they don't know how to sit with stillness. And when you stop giving them your reaction, they call you distant, cold, unemotional. But you know better. You're not cold. You're calm. And calmness in a chaotic world is often mistaken for detachment, but it's actually discipline. You've disciplined your energy. You've refined your focus. You've stopped allowing your spirit to be hijacked by every emotional spark someone throws your way. You've stopped playing games that only leave you depleted. You've stopped showing up in battles where your silence is the only weapon left that still honors your soul. And what does this make you?